Some of the very same scientists who built weapons for Adolf Hitler were, just months later, working quietly inside American laboratories, given new homes, new jobs, and in some cases, entirely new identities. The United States government kept this secret for decades. And decades later, these same men helped put American astronauts on the moon. This is the story of Operation Paperclip. Before we continue, if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II history, please follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It genuinely helps us keep bringing you these stories. And honestly, it costs you nothing but takes just a couple of seconds, so please do consider hitting that subscribe button. It truly means a lot to us. Now, let's step back into 1945, into the final chaotic weeks of Nazi Germany's collapse. As Allied forces advanced into Germany from all directions in the final months of the war, they began discovering something genuinely extraordinary, evidence of astonishingly advanced German technology, particularly in the field of rocketry, technology far more sophisticated than anything the Allies themselves had developed. At the center of this discovery was the V-2 rocket, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, developed by German engineers under a program based at a secret research facility called Peenemünde, located along Germany's Baltic coastline. The V-2 had already caused devastating destruction during the war's final year, striking London and other Allied cities with terrifying, unprecedented speed and accuracy, representing a genuine leap forward in military technology that had cost thousands of civilian lives. Leading this remarkable, terrifying rocket program was a young German engineer named Wernher von Braun, a brilliant scientist whose technical genius had made him indispensable to Nazi Germany's advanced weapons development throughout the war's final years. As Germany's defeat became increasingly inevitable, von Braun and his team faced an urgent, genuinely dangerous decision. Soviet forces were rapidly advancing from the east, and everyone involved in the rocket program understood that being captured by Soviet troops would likely mean permanent forced labor, or worse. So von Braun made a calculated decision that would ultimately shape the rest of his life. He and roughly 500 of his key scientists and engineers deliberately traveled westward, specifically positioning themselves to surrender to American forces rather than risk capture by the advancing Soviet army. In May 1945, von Braun and his team formally surrendered to American soldiers, and almost immediately, American military intelligence officers recognized the extraordinary value of what they had just acquired. Not just captured equipment, but the actual scientific minds behind it. American intelligence agencies quickly recognized an unprecedented opportunity. Germany's rocket scientists possessed knowledge that could potentially save years, perhaps decades, of American research and development in missile technology. Technology that was rapidly becoming strategically critical in the emerging Cold War rivalry with the Soviet Union. This recognition led directly to the creation of a classified American program, initially called Operation Overcast, later renamed Operation Paperclip, specifically designed to identify, recruit, and secretly transport valuable German scientists to the United States. The program's name reportedly came from the simple paperclips American officials attached to the files of scientists they wanted to recruit, marking them for special processing, separate from ordinary prisoners of war and captured military personnel. This recruitment effort presented American officials with a genuinely difficult moral complication. Many of the scientists being recruited had directly participated in Nazi Germany's war effort, Some had even utilized forced concentration camp labor in the actual production of weapons like the V-2 rocket. The Mittelwerk factory, where V-2 rockets were actually manufactured, had operated using an estimated 20,000 forced laborers, prisoners from nearby concentration camps who endured horrific conditions, with thousands dying from exhaustion, malnutrition, and brutal treatment during production. This deeply troubling connection meant that some scientists recruited through Operation Paperclip carried genuine moral responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity, knowledge that American officials were often aware of, yet chose to overlook in favor of acquiring valuable scientific and technical expertise. President Harry Truman had actually issued explicit orders prohibiting the recruitment of any scientist who had been an active Nazi Party member or who had participated directly in war crimes. But American intelligence officers frequently circumvented these restrictions by quietly altering or sanitizing official employment records. Von Braun himself had actually been a member of the Nazi Party and held an officer's rank within the SS, facts that were downplayed or omitted entirely from his official American recruitment paperwork, presenting him instead as simply a brilliant, apolitical scientist swept up by wartime circumstances. Throughout 1945 and into the following years, hundreds of German scientists, engineers, and technical specialists were secretly transported to the United States, many settling initially at Fort Bliss in Texas, and later at facilities in Huntsville, Alabama, where America's rocket development program would eventually take root. These scientists worked initially on developing American versions of the V-2 rocket technology, conducting extensive test launches at White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, gradually adapting and improving upon the German designs for American military applications. As Cold War tensions escalated throughout the late 1940s and into the 1950s, the strategic value of these recruited scientists became increasingly apparent. Their expertise in rocketry became absolutely central to America's developing capabilities in both military missile technology and, eventually, space exploration. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had conducted its own parallel recruitment efforts, capturing and relocating different groups of German rocket scientists and technical specialists to work within Soviet missile and space programs, creating an unusual technological rivalry rooted in shared wartime origins. This meant that both emerging Cold War superpowers had essentially built the foundational elements of their competing space and missile programs using knowledge and personnel originally developed under Nazi Germany's wartime weapons research, an uncomfortable historical reality both nations largely avoided publicly acknowledging. Throughout the 1950s, von Braun and his team continued their work in Huntsville, Alabama, gradually transitioning from purely military missile development toward the broader, more ambitious goal of genuine space exploration, a personal passion von Braun had actually harbored since his youth. Von Braun became genuinely influential in shaping American public enthusiasm for space exploration during this period, appearing in popular magazine articles and even collaborating with Walt Disney on television programs specifically designed to build public support for ambitious future space missions. This carefully cultivated public image, presenting von Braun as a visionary scientist genuinely devoted to peaceful space exploration, effectively overshadowed his more troubling wartime history for most ordinary Americans, who remained largely unaware of his previous Nazi Party membership and SS officer rank. When the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, in October 1957, it triggered genuine alarm and urgency throughout the United States, dramatically accelerating American investment in rocket technology and space exploration capabilities. Following this dramatic wake-up call, von Braun and his team were transferred to the newly established National Aeronautics and Space Administration, commonly known as NASA, where their accumulated rocket expertise became genuinely central to America's rapidly accelerating space program. Throughout the following decade, von Braun served as a leading figure in developing the Saturn V rocket, the massive, powerful launch vehicle that would eventually carry American astronauts successfully to the Moon during the historic Apollo program missions. When Apollo 11 successfully launched in July 1969, ultimately achieving the first human moon landing in history, von Braun stood among the many engineers and scientists celebrating this genuinely extraordinary technological achievement, one built directly upon decades of accumulated rocket expertise. This achievement represented, in many ways, the ultimate culmination of Operation Paperclip's original strategic gamble. Technology and expertise originally developed for Nazi Germany's wartime weapons program had eventually helped place American astronauts safely on the surface of the Moon. Yet throughout this remarkable technological triumph, the deeper moral complications surrounding Operation Paperclip remained largely unaddressed publicly, with many Americans genuinely unaware of the program's troubling connections to forced labor, war crimes, and the deliberate concealment of certain scientists' actual wartime activities. It would take decades before investigative journalists and historians began seriously examining and publicizing the full extent of Operation Paperclip's ethical complications, gradually revealing details about forced labor connections and deliberately falsified employment records that had been concealed for years. Some scientists recruited through this program were eventually identified through subsequent historical investigation as having more direct and troubling connections to Nazi war crimes than initially acknowledged, leading to renewed public debate about America's post-war handling of these ethically complicated recruitment decisions. Von Braun himself continued working within NASA until the early 1970s, ultimately becoming widely celebrated as one of the most important figures in the history of American space exploration, even as historians continued debating the full moral complexity of his personal wartime history. Today, Operation Paperclip remains studied as a genuinely complicated historical example of pragmatic Cold War decision-making, one that produced extraordinary scientific achievements while simultaneously raising enduring, uncomfortable questions about accountability, justice, and the true cost of prioritizing strategic advantage over complete moral transparency. Thanks so much for watching. If this untold story of science, secrecy, and moral complexity surprised you, please leave a comment below, follow our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more untold stories from World War II. Until next time, take care.